Okay, everybody, we're getting started. This is day number 2 of our long marathon weekend of Objective-C programming. If I could have you settle down a little bit, that'd be nice. Also might be slightly respectful. Well, maybe not. If you're actually listening to me right now, thank you. All right. You can talk later. How's that? All right, so we're going to start in this morning with another tutorial. And this tutorial is going to demonstrate the private methods that are available in the .m file versus the .h file. So we'll use a combination of techniques, and I'll show you another couple of characteristics about the interface builder so that you guys can get a better, a better feel for the iOS in a programming environment. All right, so what we're going to do in this one is this one is called this one's actually called Color Chooser. So if you're downloading this tutorial, it's on the bhacker.com website, and it is, oops, we are here already. It is under Object-Oriented Programming in Objective-C, and it is in the source code examples. And when you're out here, go ahead and download a couple of them. It's called Color Chooser Tutorial. So Color Chooser Tutorial. Also get the jigsaw puzzle. We're going to do both of them this morning because these are more entertaining. They're fun. The jigsaw puzzle you can play around with this afternoon if you get bored. How's that? Because you could probably use it as your project if you wanted to. It's fairly easy. It uses the touch events on the back of the gesture control and touch events on the back of the phone. So that's kind of an educational for the most part. All right, so just as we did with the plist tutorial, we'll have to make sure it works. I haven't tried these tutorials since the newer version of Xcode, so this is more of a test as well to see if everything is still going to work, which I'm pretty sure it will, but we'll see what happens. So download the Color Chooser and Jigsaw Puzzle. You can also download NSArray tutorial if you want to as well. In fact, I'm going to take this one too while I'm here. And then Number Picker is the one we'll do as well. So, whenever you get internet access, I should say, you can download some of these tutorials here. Sometimes the internet does kind of buggy, so let's see. All right, so I've got those two downloaded too. All right, so we are going to do the Color Chooser first. So in the Color Chooser, we're going to create an RGB color controller to change the background of a form, or of a window, I should say, or a view. So we're going to start out the tutorial by opening up a brand new Xcode project with a single view. And the screenshot's kind of old. It's from the old version. So let's just go ahead and open up a brand new Xcode project. So here's my Xcode. And I'm going to create a new Xcode project. And I'm going to create the single view application and click on Next. And I'm going to call this one Color Chooser. Yesterday, actually, someone noticed that if you call it the same thing as the tutorial file, you won't be able to load it because there will be duplicate project names. So if you think you might be looking at the solution later on, and you don't know if you're necessarily going to be able to finish this one, call it something else. Otherwise, you're going to have duplicate project names, and it's not going to load up correctly. So you can call it like Test Chooser or something like that. Anyway, so this one's going to be for the iPhone, and so we can use it for iPad if you want. It doesn't really matter. Go ahead and save it. I'm going to save mine to the desktop. And then I get the empty project that opens up. So I want to build the GUI first. So I'm going to click on the storyboard, main.storyboard, and then I see the screen that shows up here. And I'm going to go take a look at my instructions to see how far along I should go here. So we're going to drag 6 labels, 3 UI sliders, and 3 UI text fields, and put them on the view, and arrange them to look like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 labels, and 3 text views, and 3 sliders. So let's go ahead and build this layout here. So let's take a look here. Let's see. I think I'm just going to put my labels out first. We got label 1. Doesn't really matter what color you do it. 2, 3. And RGB is red. Well, let's take a look here. Red, green, and blue. So I'm going to label them red, green, and blue. Red, green, And this one's going to be called blue. And then I'm going to have another one down here for the hex number. So this is going to be hex. And then the number itself. So I'll put here number. It's going to be the number. It's going to show up there. Actually, I'll do this with it. There we go. And then, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, what am I missing here? Oh, yes, the decimal conversion. So I'll put the little decimal here too. There we go. Actually, I put the decimal underneath it a little bit here. Decimal. Oh, here I'll put it this way. Here we go. Move this up a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then I'll put the 3 text boxes here. So let's go text box. I think my phone is getting narrower and narrower or something here. Let's see. That looks pretty good. You could play around with them, make them all the same size. I just kind of eyeballed it. Looks pretty good to me. You can, you know, look up the exact measurements if you wanted to. And now I'm going to put 3 sliders on here. So let's go slider. Here we go, a slider. So we got 1 slider, 2 slider, 3 sliders. And you notice that the sliders look slightly different on this one as it does on the screenshot. That's because this is an older API version. And I'm going to leave the background. Well, let me change my background just to be consistent with the picture. So I'll make the background green. There we go. All right. So if you've gotten this far, you've got the 3 text boxes, the 6 labels, and the 3 sliders. Looking pretty good. Now we have to change some properties about the sliders and change some properties about the text boxes and stuff as we go through this. Because what we're going to do is arrange the red, the green, and the blue so that when we move the sliders, it's going to change our background color. And then it's going to put in here the decimal equivalents. So you can use this if you wanted to for your HTML programming or for whatever it is you're doing. Or you always have to remember the RGB stuff. It's kind of a hassle. So most people like look it up on the internet to see what the codes are because no one's going to memorize RGB codes. It seems kind of senseless, actually. So let's see. That's looking pretty good. I was giving it a few minutes for people to catch up. So assuming that you're caught up or getting there, now we're going to change the text label controllers to match the image above here. So for the slider, we're going to change the values in the attribute inspector. So for the slider itself, in the attribute selector, we can change the range. So we only have 255 as the maximum, and 0 is going to be the minimum. And we'll put the current on 0. So what does that mean? Well, if we go in here and we click on this little slider, and we look up here, we see that we've got the maximum at 0. We need to change this one to 255. And then on the current, I'm going to change the current, put it on 1. Or is it 0? I'm going to put it on 0, actually. So what I've done is I've changed the attribute inspector for the slider and changed them all. So they'll all be, well, this is not going to be representative because this is really like 50%. So if we put them on 0, they'll all be at one end. So I go ahead and set the current value to 0, the minimum to 0, and the maximum to 255. I'm sorry? For all 3 of them, yeah. So do it for all 3. So 0, and you can actually just type in here instead of using the arrow to up it. So, and let's put this one on 0. So let's see, 255. And then we'll put this one on 0. Hopefully and then you can actually stretch these guys out and make them a little bit bigger if you want as well. So I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger, kind of give you guys time to catch up. So assuming that we look like this, we're on 0, 0, 0 actually as a starting value. Now because of 0, 0, 0, you could stick 0 in here if you wanted to. And then, or you can just leave it. It doesn't really matter what you stick in there. So I just stuck a 0 in there because really I'm on 0, 0, 0. When you move this, it's going to change the red, the green, and the blue. Or excuse me, yeah, the red, the green, and the blue. So let's go back to the tutorial and see where we left off. Now we also want to change the keyboard value for the 3 text fields. We want to put numbers in there. And we want to make sure it doesn't take any characters because we're really putting numbers between 0 and 255. And so we're going to change the text fields to numbers and punctuation, and then the return type to done. So in the text fields, this is where we're going to change keyboard. And then we'll change right where we did yesterday with the return key. So if we go back into the attribute inspector over here, and we come down here, remember the return key we were setting to done the other day. The keyboard type, we just put it on numbers and punctuation. That way it takes numeric values. It won't take characters. Because if someone puts a character in here, it'll be converted to an ASCII character, ASCII number sequence, which won't be appropriate. So we want to change these to make sure that the keyboard is on numbers and punctuation and that the return type is set to done. So go ahead and do that for all 3 of the text boxes. Whether you have a 0 in there or not doesn't really matter. So set the numbers and punctuation and set the return type to done. Now your boxes should look sort of like that. You can also set, if you wanted, to the justification. So like right now it's left justified. If I wanted to do right justification, where numbers normally show up on the right hand side, I can do this to it actually. So now I've moved the zeros over to the right. So it looks a little bit better in terms of, you know, for a UI interface. So I could still probably, you know what, here, now that I'm thinking about it, let me just make my number boxes the same size at least. This one's still slightly bigger. There we go. Now I have my number boxes the same size, so they're looking a little bit better now. Okay, so let me go back to the tutorial. We're going, are we need more time to catch up? Okay, let me give it a few more minutes here. So, excuse me? So, are you talking about the numbers to be right aligned? If you click in the text field and you click over here to the alignment in the attribute inspector, you can change it like that's centered, that's to the right. You do want to make sure that you put this down here to numbers and punctuation though. So you're getting numbers in there instead of. So are we good? Okay, very good. It's always good to stop me, you know, at least so you don't fall behind. I can always pause as well. So now we're going to open up the view controller and we're going to wire the components to the view controller so that we can program them and play around with them. So we're going to wire the 3 sliders, the 3 text fields, and the 1 hex label, because we're going to change the number and put it on the hex label, to properties. So we're going to call it red slider, blue slider, and hex slider. They're all going to be properties, and we're going to change the value of the properties with what was added in on the text fields, or with how we're going to change. If we move the slider, then the slider will allow us to change the text field. So this is a very common thing that most people do when they're designing the UI. So let's go ahead and take our sliders first and work with that. So I'm going to get rid of the side panel, and I'm moving this over a little bit, and I'm going to hit on my little tuxedo icon. So I have the view controller, and we want to go into .h. So we got view controller.h, and let me make this a little bit smaller so that I can drag and drop. Here, I'll make this a little bit bigger here. Okay. So in between the @ interface and the @n, let's make a red slider here. So I'm going to control drag. And this one's going to be called red slider. And then I got green slider. So control drag it over. Green slider. And blue slider. And then this number here, this is going to be our hexadecimal number. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger actually. So let's see what we're going to call that one. Actually, we're going to call that one hex label. So if you call it the same thing that's in here, then when we put the code in there, everything will match and you don't have to go change stuff around. So hex label is what I'm going to call this guy here. So I'm going to control drag it over here and call it hex label. And then now I'm going to have my text fields for my red, green, and blue. So this one's going to be called red text, green text, and blue text. So let's do that. So control drag it over. This one's going to be called red text. And this is going to be called green text. Oops. And then we have blue text. Oh, blue text. So we have red text, green text, blue text. This always reminds me of green eggs and ham. I think 1 and 3. No, that's Dr. Seuss. Red text, blue text, green text. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We're going to add 2 new method prototypes now. And we're going to add this one here to the viewcontroller.h. The method prototypes are going to be for a slider changed and also for a text field changed. So we're going to look at the changed events on the text field so we can adjust the background color. So, excuse me? You want some time? Okay. So let me just pause this for a second. Okay, let's continue. So you should have the green, the red, and the blue sliders. You need the sliders. You also need the hex label here. And you also need the text fields, so 3 text fields. So hopefully you've got that going for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the 2 method prototypes. 2 method prototypes, I'm just going to cut and paste them, or copy and paste them and stick them in the code. One of them is going to be slider changed, and the other one's going to be text field changed. And remember what we did before? We wired them 2 methods that we put into the, so it's easier because we're going to have more than one wired. So I'm going to come down here and put the method prototypes. I'm still in the viewcontroller.h file. Make sure you're in viewcontroller.h and stick the method prototypes down at the bottom or anywhere you want, really. And you see I automatically get the little solid or the little bubbles next to it, which means I can wire them to the UI. But let's see what we're going to do with that first. So slider changed is a changed event for the slider. So drag the slider changed action to all 3 of the slider controls. You can drag it from the method to the GUI, or you can go from the GUI. I like to go from the GUI to the method, actually. But you can drag it the opposite way as well. So this is going to wire up the value changed event. So you just drag it over to that control. So let's take a look here. If I right mouse click, I'm going to see something in here on the bottom. It says value changed. So that's the value changed here, slider changed. So if you're going to go from the GUI to the code, you right mouse click on the GUI, you bring up the little screen here. On the bottom where it says value changed, drag that one over to the slider changed, if you're going to do it this way. You can also do it this way, but I never have any luck doing it. You bring up, I'll do it for the second one. So you've got the green one here. I'm going to right mouse click. You want to do all 3. I can go this way. I can click on the little button here. See I have a blue line? And I can drag it up this way to this blue line. But this doesn't work for me ever. It's really hard. I don't know. This works better for me. So, I'm sorry? You can control drag it. I wasn't pressing the control button, which is probably why it wasn't working. So I like to go from the controller to the method. So go ahead and wire up all 3 of the value changed method to the slider changed method that we put in here, the prototype. And when you do that, you'll see in here that it's been set for each one. You can make this box bigger as well if you're so inclined. So this one is for the slider changed. We're also going to do the same thing on the text changed. We have a method, so if we change the slider, we're going to change the text, and we're going to change the color of the background. If we change the text, we're going to change the slider, and then we're going to change the color of the background. It's going to work both ways. So in the code, the next step is going to be for the text field changed. So you also drag from the text field changed icon to all three of the text field controls, and select to wire it to the did end on exit event. So when you press return in the text fields, it'll update the slider and change the background color for us. So when you're finished, the view controller connections should be all connected. So let's take a look down here then and finish the text boxes. So in here, if I right mouse click, then I'm going to have something down here that says value changed. But I really want to do did end on exit. So when I press return, or when I press value change, either one of them actually works. But I like the return on exit, especially when we signal done on exit. So we can just close the keyboard and just take the value and signal that it's changed. So did end on exit. I'm going to wire it down now to the text field. So take all three of the text fields and wire them to the text field changed method. Same thing we did with the sliders, actually. But instead of taking the did change, we're taking the did end on exit. So wire these three. So now I'm wired on the text fields and I'm wired on the sliders. Do we need a few more minutes to do that? Are we good? A few more minutes or no a few more minutes? A few more minutes?
We did not have to do value change for those text fields, is it?
No, we're on the text fields. We're not doing the value change, but we could, but we're not going to do it that way. Instead, we're going to take the did end on exit. You could take any of these things, actually. Did touch it, did change it, but well, we'll do, it's more common to see the did end on exit, actually.
So the work is like almost the same for both the things, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Except for down here on the sliders, we did value change because there's no did end on exit for the sliders. Did we make it this far? We have all of our components wired. Okay, good. So let's see what's next. Now we're going to go to the .m file, and this is what I was saying before. This tutorial is interesting because it allows you to put a private method in there. So we're going to put a private method in the .m file. So add a private method prototype to the viewcontroller.m file at the top. So this is the private method. It's called set label colors to contrast with background. So I'm going to copy this method. Let me show you where I'm going to put this actually. So if I move over to the .m file, at the top I have an @ interface and I have an @end. And you're wondering, well, didn't that just come from the .h file? It does. The .h file with the @ interface and @end is the public interface. This is the private interface to the same class. So I can put a method prototype in here, which is what it's expecting. So I can still, if I wanted to, I could wire properties to this method, or excuse me, to this section here. It's not really a method, it's a section. I could wire properties to it, or I can add prototypes. When I add this prototype, this is private. I can't get to it from other areas of the application. It's only visible inside of the viewcontroller.m file. So this is how you make a private method. I could put private data in here too if I wanted to. Okay, so I added the function prototype, or the method prototype. Now I'm going to need to synthesize the statements for the properties that we added. So we've got 1, 2, 3 synthesized lines here. I'm going to, actually 4. These are all of the properties. So we had the three sliders, and we had the text label property. We didn't really have to do the text fields. We just did these. So I'm going to copy this over and put it in to the code. And I'm going to stick it inside the implementation because it needs to go inside of the @implementation and the @end. Now I could stick all this if I wanted to. Let me just do it. I'm going to stick it all in one line. So I've got red text, red slider, green text, green slider, blue text, blue slider, blue slider, there we go, and hex label. So I'm showing you that you can actually just string them all together if you want to. I just strung them all together rather than having them on separate lines. So let's see. Alright, so after you synthesize them, now they're visible from a public interface. They're visible inside of the .m file now. So that's how we made them visible from a public perspective. Now we're going to add the following method implementation. Well, this is the method that we created. The method that we created for the private method called set label colors to contrast with background. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get a data type, and the data type is going to be a CG float. Well, it's going to be a float for computer graphics as part of the CG language, a 2D graphic package. We're going to have a red value, a green value, and a blue value, and then an alpha value. And what we're going to do is set the RGB values for the background of the view. So self.view.background color is going to be get red from the red value, and then it's going to be the green value, and then it's going to be the blue value plus the alpha value. So it's like setting the RGB to the red, green, and the blue to the numbers that we're going to use for the values. And the values are going to come out of the slider, or they're going to come out of the text box when we type them into the text box. So for the ID subview, set the subview, we're going to set the background color. After we create a UI color, and the UI color that we're going to create is going to be an RGB color. So what we're doing is we're setting the color, actually. And then the color is going to be for the values in the sliders. So go ahead and cut and paste and stick this one in here as well, or copy and stick this one in the viewcontroller.m file. And I'm just going to stick it right here on the top, actually, so I can find it. And that seemed to have copied okay. So this is how we're getting the colors from the set label colors. So we're going to need to call this method from the other actions that we're doing. So one of the actions that we're going to do is going to be a changed value here, or a number that was entered in with an exit over here. So these two methods down here, well, we actually don't have them down here, we have them in here. These two methods need to be implemented. But because we cut and paste and put them in here, we wrote them in here, depending upon how you did it, they're not automatically in the .m, which means we're going to need to add it. So if I go into the file again, I can just go ahead and insert in the SliderChanged, and then underneath it I've got the next one down here. So here it is here, the text field changed. So they're both side by side, so go ahead and copy them and put them in there, and I'll go over them in a second. And then looks like we're going to change the view did load as well. So okay, so on here you notice that the bubbles filled in. So I have the implementation of the horizontal slider, and then I have the implementation of the 3 text fields. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can sort of see it. And all we're doing essentially on the slider changes, we're going to set the background color to the color of the values of the slider. So we have self.redSlider.value, and we divide it by 255 to get the RGB color from it. So it's just a red, blue, and green. You know, you say a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And we're adjusting it with the sliders, and then we can see the background color change. Because on a slider change, we're going to grab the colors that each one of the sliders is connected with and change the background color to that from an RGB scale. Then we're going to update the text field with the exact value that was selected from the slider. So the self.redtext.text and greentext.text is setting the property, and bluetext.text is setting the property to a string with the format. So we're taking and creating a string with format of the number, and we're setting the text. Even though we put and we said we wanted to have a number in there, a number or a special character, I can't remember how it was called, but we changed the property to basically represent numbers. It's going to represent decimal precision for us, so if we can have a dot something in there, which is actually kind of interesting. It's just the format that gets changed for the presentation. Now on the colors, down here a little bit, I'm going to separate this out a little bit. That's the end of the method. There we go. On the text field color, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing the opposite order. We're taking the text that's in the box and we're converting it so we can change the slider. So the slider's changing the text in the boxes, and the text in the boxes is changing the slider value. And it'll do it for each one of the times we press return, because we have the did end on exit for each one of the boxes wired to this one component. So now the view did load method starts up automatically when we load the project up, so we can actually set the background color or set the text in the boxes to what we want it to be. So I believe that's what's going to happen here. It is. So in the view did unload, excuse me. In the view did load method, we're gonna, which is weird because it says finally change the view did load. This is wrong. It should say view did load method, not view did unload. So view did load. We're going to change the view did load so that the self.red text is going to be equal to the self.blue text, which is going to be equal to the green text. We're just going to set the values to nil. So we can actually leave this off and it'll show up with the default color. I'm not going to leave it off actually. I'll just leave it alone. I'm just going to run the project right now actually to show you what it looks like, and we'll see what happens with this. So if I run the project, and then we'll play around with the view did load for a second. It might be the unload, it's actually checking the objects on the unload, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other. So it loads up, and now I can see I've moved the red. So the red is at 255 right now. The other ones are still on 0. And I can put it back, and I can kind of see how the red works with that. Oops. The green, if I move the green over, I'm moving the green up to a maximum of 255. And then I'm getting my hex label to actually adjust, because in here as well, I forgot to mention it, we're also updating the label value with the hex representation of the number. Excuse me? We called the hex number. Let me go back to the code. This one here, if you dragged it over and you called it hex, if you called it hex, where'd it go? Here it is, hex label. Then in the code, it's updating the hex label. So both of them actually get updated. So the hex label's here. So set the text of the hex label to the string with format. We're changing the format to put it in a hexadecimal notation for us. So the other part of it that should work is, and I didn't test it yet, were the button or the actual text boxes. So in here I see I've got number starts out empty because nothing's happened yet. If I put 255 in this box, I've moved the red completely up to 255. You notice that the slider actually changed. So if I put 255 in here, I think I'm going to get a black screen eventually. Now I have yellow. And if I put 255 in here, well, I get white. Yeah, full color. So I got full color values here, and then I can adjust the colors. So if this were on like a phone, you can actually use it as an app actually to figure out, well, what RGB color do I want? Because most people go to, there's like, if you look on the internet, there's like a ton of different like utilities out there where you just type in the numbers and it gives you color, or you adjust the color the way you like it and tells you the number. So if you were writing an application, you can get the decimal equivalent or the hexadecimal equivalent for HTML programming, for programming in general. So it's actually kind of a handy little app. Just changes the color essentially. And hopefully you have a, here we go, now I got my green going. So you put the green on total. Let's see. Oh, now we got the green going here. So now I got my green back. So how do we get? I think the red is going to give us purple. Here we go. Now we got our purple going. Take away some of the green. There we go. Now we got the purple going here for those purple people. So, all right. So that was the RGB color chooser. So hopefully that was. And basically showing you how the components work together, which was the learning objective of that app. So let me take a, actually let me stop the video actually, and then I'll do the next tutorial and the next one, so it's an easier break actually.